Next, I'm going to show you some growth strategies here. So very interestingly enough, there's only three ways to grow a business, right? Three ways to grow a business. Okay, I don't care if you're Apple, I don't care if you're Microsoft, I don't care if you're a real estate agent, a plumber, an electrician, I don't give a fuck who you are. If you want to make more money, there's only three ways to do it. Three ways to grow a business. So number one is to increase the number of customers, okay? Which obviously in your business, this is like, again, this is a widget, or you can say real estate. So if you have a widget, let's just say you're going to sell, cars. You want to sell X amount of cars. You got to sell more customers, right? Pretty obvious. We talk about this a lot. That when it comes to increasing the number of customers for people in real estate, this is number transactions. Okay, typically is the way people say it. It's like, oh, I got to increase the number of transactions, right? It's very overtly talked about. Obviously, if you want to make more money in real estate, selling more real estate typically will get you there. However, there's a couple different ways to look at this. So number of transactions, I want you to also think about it in terms of real estate. You can also look at this in terms of number of individual clients you closed a deal with. Increasing the number of customers. So in real estate, it's either the number of transactions, or you can even relate it now to the number of individuals you've actually closed a deal with. So it's like, as an example, some of you, in residential real estate, people, let's just say every time you work with a seller, you try to call up sellers, you try to list their property for sale, you get them to sell their property, everybody's super happy. Let's say you close 10 deals this year, and your 10 deals, right? I'm just gonna move this over real quick so I can delete this, give us a little bit more room. Yeah, 10 sellers, 10 transactions. Pretty self-explanatory. If you're doing leasing, you have 10 tenants and you get 10 transactions, right? If you're doing leasing with landlord rep, right? 10 landlords, you lease them all out. Maybe you didn't find the tenant, somebody else did. It's, you might have, 10 different landlords, or in some instances, you might have one landlord you do 10 deals with. And we'll talk about more about that later down the road, right? But there's different ways to look at it. If you're in commercial real estate investment sales like me, okay, you have, if you have you call up sellers, they want to sell, they sell their property. You have, let's say you do 10 transactions this year. That is 10 different clients that you sold with, okay? So in order to do that, you might need more customers, more sellers individually that you want to sell with, but you also, which we'll explain in a moment here, you represented both sides. Now that's a second customer. So you might have done 10 transactions with 20 customers, and that you could call it, double ending deals. So you could say, oh, well, I had 20 technical transactions because I had 10 buyers and 10 sellers, 20 transactions, 20 different customers, or maybe you only had 5 buyers who bought 10 deals. Is this making sense when it comes to customers? And no matter what business you're in, you want to think about it no matter what, is every year we want to increase the number of clients that we work with, because that should enhance and grow the number of transactions that we do. And how do we do that? Well, big way to do this is lead gen, right? Obviously, lead generation on any extent that you could possibly imagine. I'm just gonna make it look a little bit cleaner here, right? So, if you want to grow the number of customers, this means being in a position where you can powerfully and predictably generate more opportunities. I'm going to write down a couple strategies here, okay? So this is going to be, let me do strategies, okay? So one is going to be specifically growing the amount, right? Or actually, let me say increasing the amount of leads each month. Now, I'm going to say two things. Seller leads specifically. I'm going to copy this and paste. Now, number 2 is increasing the number of buyer leads each month. Now, I'm going to say specifically, I'm going to change this to VIP buyer leads to your lists, right? To your VIP list. Because, again, some of us are really good at generating the opportunities for sellers, but they are terrible at the buyer side of the business. Other sides are really, really good at the buyer side of the business, and they're terrible at the seller lead side of the business. So wherever you feel like you need the strength in, we can talk about this at length. I could spend an hour, or I could spend an endless amount of time talking about different ways to generate seller leads, but really simply put, I'm going to do an equal sign over here. Do it here. Yeah, right? So then you just go to the core 4 lead gen strategies, which is essentially cold calling, slash cold, the way Alex Shimozy talks about it real quick, cold 121, which is cold calling slash cold, you could say door knocking. You can say cold, emailing, whatever, right? Like one to one, like just quickly sending them reaching, knowing a group that you want to reach out to, reaching out to that group specifically, or even pulling a list and calling them individually or going to door knock. Next, you can even do cold one to many, which we've talked about before, which is any type of paid ads, or blasting through, blasting texts, ringless voicemails, you name it. You could do any one of those strategies. Next, you can do warm one-to-one, which is your sphere of influence slash your database. Okay, these are people that you can ask for referrals. Okay, and the last one is warm one to many, which this warm one to many strategy is basically anything on social media. Now, you can do any one of these strategies, and this will increase the amount of people that you're reaching out to. Now, there's a third piece here. This third piece is also working with level up or downstream clients. Now, what this means is that this is working with a client who looks, as an example, buys 2 to 20 properties or sells, 2+ properties annually. So, I'm just going to say 2+. So as an example, to increase the number of customers, I'll actually explain this in a different way. Working with upper level clients. So number of customers. So this is saying how can I work with somebody who can get me more customers? This is actually better explained in a way of saying something like, I can work with a chicken versus, I'm going to explain it this way, chicken versus the egg, where, an egg is a lead. And it's like, look, you can work with one egg as an example, right? Work with somebody who is a lead, or you can actually work with a bunch of chickens. And as an example, chicken, lay eggs, or they'll give you leads. So instead of working with any of these, one of the most powerful ways is finding referral partners, right? So this would be like VIP referral partners who can continually send you deals over and over and over and over again, right? So you have somebody who will just send you customers over and over and over again. So as an example, your lender, your title rep, a contractor, your financial advisor, any one of these people can actually just send you more customers. So these are things that, like, as an example, these core 4 is you doing it. And then within the core 4, there are this specific piece. You can actually find people who will go do your business, basically help you grow your business for you. Now, the goal here is an example. Let me run over here to some numbers now. This is the number example, but this is going to be crazy down the road. So let's just say you have, 10 transactions. Here, you're going to have the value of the real estate. So let's say number of customers. Okay. The number of customers. We have sale value. Let's just say they're all worth $500,000. Actually, what we're going to do, this is going to be the sales price of the property. Okay. So we're going to say $1 million. Okay, and then this will be total sales volume, okay, which would be equals that times that, pretty easy, 10 million. Last part here is average commission, and we're going to do 2%. So that means this is going to equal your commission, total income, okay? So pretty simply put, if you do 10 sales at $1 million for $10 million at 2%, you're going to make 200 grand. Now, obviously, you can change this to do whatever you want. You can see how, it'll change it out. This is the first way of the 3 ways to grow your business. So I'm just going to raise this up to here. Now, let's go to number 2, because it starts getting pretty interesting, okay? Because everyone talks about increasing the number of customers. I get really obsessed over 2 and 3 because it's when you add them all together, magic happens, okay? So number 2 is increasing unit of sale / you could call it ticket price or ticket value. Okay, increasing the unit of sale or ticket value. Now, in our world, right, and really this for a widget, this is saying instead of selling a $1,000 widget, selling a $10,000 widget. Instead of in our world in real estate, this means selling more expensive assets, right? So now, obviously, if you're doing real estate and you're doing residential, start selling, if you're doing an average sales price of 500 grand, like 7 years ago when I was doing residential real estate, selling 100 houses a year, 7 years ago, whatever it was. my average sales price was like 400 grand, 500 grand. So like it was very difficult to make a crazy amount of money because my sales price was so freaking low. I mean, now my average sales price is like 3 million bucks and our average commission percentage is like, 4.7, 4.5 to 5.5 is where we've been ranging from for a long time. But I'm going to explain to you guys as an example here. It's like selling more expensive assets. So if you're doing leasing, it's like, look, every year, if you can do, let's say, one extra transaction or two, or let's say, like we just talked about, increasing this number of transactions. So if you're doing 5, now do 7, or if you're doing 7, now do 10. If you're doing 10, now do 12. Like you don't have to every year. You don't have to grow by multiple X percent. By multiple X multiples, right? Like you don't have to go from 5 to 50 transactions a year. You don't have to go from 10 transactions to 100 transactions a year. Even if you just grew by 20% annually a year, I'm going to show you some numbers that are going to blow your fucking mind shortly. But just to give you some references, like again, if you're doing leasing and you're doing one lease a month, that's 12 a year, right? If you can get to 15. So the point is, like again, we want to just continue to inch over time. Selling more expensive assets. So a lot of us, as an example, maybe are only prospecting small little deals. Now, you guys just saw me work on a deal today during the live calling session where the guy only wanted 900, but I'm not worried so much about average sales price. I'm worrying about the average money I make. Not everything is about the average sales price. Not like, again, it's not just about selling $500,000 properties and then going to starting to sell $5 million properties or going from $1 million to 10 million or whatever it is. Like it's not just about the average sales price because there's a couple pieces of this. It's not just more expensive assets, but it's larger margins. So as an example here, right, the strategies, let's talk about some of these strategies. Okay. So one is diversification. I'm going to fucking butcher the shit out of that. Diversification of assets, okay? So when you're selling, diversification of assets, right? So this means, as an example, resi to commercial, or going from, one asset to multiple, okay? This could be from going from leasing to sales. Whatever it is that diversification of assets is going to allow you the ability to have a little bit higher of a ticket value, because if you're only stuck at selling one thing, you might get stuck in one, this little bubble of possible compensation structure. Being in residential real estate, I never thought I would earn $100,000 in one check. I never thought about it, right? In my market, that was unheard of. The average sales price in my market was like 400 to 500 grand. Obviously, this was a while ago. I wasn't in super luxury real estate, and it was very hard to break in. I couldn't fathom making a 6-figure paycheck. I couldn't even possibly think about that. It'd be absolutely unreasonable. It would never happen. Until I got into commercial, where I'm like, oh, this is actually really fucking normal. And actually now in my world, it's like, okay, well, making $1 million to $10 million checks slowly becomes a little bit more unreasonable. But then you have to start realizing getting into different deal sectors is actually more possible in those different areas, right? So, such as an example, making $1 million, by the way, is only doing a $20 million deal and making 5% commission. So if you find somebody who owns a $20 million asset or larger, and they're willing to sell it, like let's say they're motivated, similar to like the guy we just spoke to today, and he doesn't really know the intrinsic value, and you can lock up this deal for 20 million and flip it for 22, you can make 2 million. My friend, I just had a conversation with one of my close friends, we're business partners, and just sold a property last week where 300 acres of farmland, locked it up for $1.2 million and sold it for $3 million. Like you can make a 7-figure check, and it does not have to feel or be complicated. So, but that's, again, he does wholesaling for single family houses. In his world, we joked about how he's like, we used to freaking pop bottles of champagne when you make a 6-figure check on wholesaling a house. But as soon as he understood the world of outside the scope of a single family house, all of a sudden now you have the ability, and just closed last week for over $1 million of profit on a wholesale deal. So diversification is a really big one. And then also understanding, number 2 here, let's do number 2, is also multiple lenses, right? For sales. Let me explain. This means going from being only thinking about listing the property for sale to also understanding, hey, I could wholesale this. I could off-market broker it and represent both sides, maybe 90% of the time. I could wholesale it, or you can take it down yourself. Whichever way you can stretch the amount of money that you can make on a deal. Now, obviously, the quality of the deal is one of the largest and most important factors, right? Now, because number 3 is finding more distressed opportunities, because that's where the money is, opportunities, right? The more distressed opportunities you find, the more likely it is for you to make more money. Because if you're working with a very seasoned investor, as an example, who owns 70 properties and he's been doing it for 30 years, this guy is not dumb enough to make, to give you a position to make millions of dollars on his property. He's like, I'm going to make the $1 million, right? But when you're working with people who are not super sophisticated, they own one property and they are desperate to sell it. That is where, motivation plus opportunity and lack of understanding, those three things put together give you the ability to make infinite, like a crazy amount of money on these deals. So you have to understand the multiple lens strategy, where again, multiple lens for sales, which is, one second. So this is brokering versus wholesaling versus buying / flipping. Now, if as an example, if we bring this down here, right, like number of customers, this whole same situation, and I'm going to bring it right here. Now we're going to add in this, right? So not only is it, again, we went from, let's say, I'm going to do this one up top, which is, this is going to be our, what do they call it when it's like I don't know, they call it the standard, right? Or where we are now, right? They call it today, not to whatever the hell that says. Okay. Now, if you increase the number of customers, so let's say you're doing 5 now, and we can get you to 7. Now you're making 140 grand. All we did was we changed the number of customers here. Next, now you're doing the same number of customers, but now the increase, the value of this asset is now 2 million instead of 1 million. Now, instead of our today, which is 100 grand, now you've increased this piece by, call it, 20, 30%. And in this piece, we increase the average sales value. Now we're making $280,000. Magic's continuing. And we haven't really done anything too crazy. We're just paying attention to actually the levers that make us more money in this industry. Okay. The third way is increasing. Actually, let me actually stress one more thing here. The other way you could look at it is because I didn't dive into larger margins. So let's talk about larger margins. Larger margins is a huge aspect, very, very valuable. And this here has to do with commission stretching, which is a way I look at things and saying like, hey, similar to the multiple lens strategy, which I fucked up into the parentheses, all sorts of backwards. Gotta love that. The commission stretching is when you, in this case, double end all, like, let's say, double end more deals / all deals you close. This also happens to look at when, and by the way, I would even say not even just commission, I would say commission / fees. Right? Because it's not just commissions. When you're looking at double ending more deals, as an example, this is also of saying like, creative deal structures, right? Because when you understand creative deal structures, you can make deals happen where other people can't. So like, as an example, the deal I just worked on, okay, example, seller wanted $900,000 for this property that we're working on. An average broker, right? Or just broker philosophy, right, would be list this for sale. Maybe you get, even if you got 6%, okay? I mean, let's do 4. Well, I'm gonna give you a couple different scenarios, okay? One scenario is you have the broker who says, I'm gonna do listing 4%. Let's do 4%. This would be equals 900 times 4%, right? And this is your commission. Now, you could also do 900,000. Now you can do off market, right? So this one here would be an off market deal. You're going to do 6%. And instead of 36, you can make 54. As another example, I'm going to have the same 900,000. And actually, let's say this is fee, and then total. And then this one's actually going to be how. So as an example, we have a listing. Next one we have off market. The next one we're going to do is wholesaling, where in this situation, I probably could flip this deal. Let's say I can get it locked up for 900 with 100. This guy agreed, basically, didn't sign an LOI, but he was very open to the idea of selling this property for 900,000. I offered him 100 grand down and $3,000 a month over time. I know for a fact, as an example, if I can get him to agree to those terms, let's just say he would agree, that I can wholesale this deal for somewhere minimally for $1.1 million. Okay. Because someone would be putting out of pocket 200 grand to make 40,000 a year or so. We ran the numbers. It was 30 to 40,000, like 35 to $40,000 in net operating cash flow. Okay. After you pay him the debt. So in this instance, we would sell for 1.1 million bucks, right? So call it 200 grand. I'm just going to put the $200,000 here, right? Let's put a $ and remove some of these. Okay, this is wholesaling. And, obviously we can figure out, equals, what, 200,000 divided by 900, I think is the way you do it. Yep, 22%. That way of doing it would be a 22% fee. Or last but not least, we have the $900,000, same exact number. And instead of making $200,000 one time, we could buy it. And when I buy it, I can personally make $40,000 for the next however many years I want. And I would also get a cost seg on it where I would be able to get, let's say another, cost seg would give me something like, $250,000 in tax write-offs. And I might even, as an example, just that, I easily could do this, I could raise the $100,000. So I could be $0 out of pocket, tell an investor I'll pay them 10% a year on it, and they'll get paid 10 grand a year. And then for $0 out of pocket, I can make 30 grand a year for as long as I can negotiate with this guy. This guy said he might be open to doing 10 years. In this instance, it would be, call it 40 grand or 30 grand a year, which would be, call it $400,000 over the next 10 years. 400 grand. And then, by the way, this also doesn't include, this is the total, but this also doesn't include equity. Okay. And my equity would be somewhere around 200K to 300K day one. Do you understand how understanding deal structures, instead of just listing properties on the open market, and sure, if you want to tell the guy, hey, he wants 900, but I know, because I want to be a fiduciary only, and I want to, and I only want to list properties for sale and be a robot, then guess what? You might be able to tell him, maybe I can get you $1.1 million, just like I said I could possibly sell it for. You're going to make 44 grand versus trying to make 54 grand, which is still 25% more money. If you do an off-market deal at 900, which you'd actually be, you probably set it for 950 as an example. It'd be you'd have to add your fee on top. So call it 57 grand, whatever it's going to be. Maybe it's 975, right? You could probably get somebody to do that, no problem. Again, you can wholesale it for 200, but do you see the difference? Where now not only are we increasing the average sales price, but we're finding out a way that instead of making 2% fees, right? We're saying instead of this listing, again, which actually this is if you double ended it. So I'm going to take that back. Instead of making 2% fees, we find a way to make a minimum of 5% per deal. Do you understand that with nothing changed so far, we did, instead of 5 deals at $1 million, 2% commission, we now increased our customers to 7. At $1 million, we went to 140, and now our second to last example is now 7 customers, same thing like we just talked about, but at $2 million sales price, 5% commission. Now you're making 700 fucking grand. This is a 7x return based off of today's numbers, right? This today example. This is a 7x return. So if you can follow, and this is only 2 of the 3 things, okay? Because this is just going from 5 customers to 7 customers at $1 million at 2%. Now we're saying the same 7 customers, $2 million sales price instead of $1 million, and we're making 5% fees on average, because I just showed you how you can, instead of make a 2% fee, you can make a 22% fee. Or, I can't even tell you what the fee is. $200K in equity, $250K in tax write-offs, plus $400,000 over the next 10 years. I mean, you're basically making 100% fee. I mean, for fuck's sake, it's crazy. Okay, I can't even calculate how much money this is. 250. Let's just do this. 250 plus 400,000 at 650 plus 200 to 300K. Guys, that's basically 100%. This is $850 to $950,000 worth of equity. I mean, and obviously the property is going to grow in value. So this is over 100. I'm going to write this down. 100% plus in fees. That's a 5, not a percent sign. 100% plus fees. Who here wants to make over 100% fees? Am I the only one? This is crazy. If you know how to deal structure the right way, this one deal as an example, we can make over a 10-year period of time 100% fees.